Happy morning, everybody, on October 14th, and go Mariners, right? So Rhonda, excellent on the shirt there. That's for sure. That's for sure. For all you, all you ersatz baseball fans out there, at least this is the time to really rally around them. Hey, so I've got just a quick reminder up here is that today is the last day that Microsoft is actually offering support for Windows 10. And we now in this post-COVID world depend upon cyber connectivity for so much of what we're doing. And the vulnerabilities, as we all know, relative to phishing attacks, relative to direct attacks on our operating systems and through our emails and through our chats and through our social messaging, is very real. And so today, after today, right, vulnerabilities are expected to be exploited in Windows 10. And so if you're not on Windows 11 at this point, right, and if your machine cannot upgrade to Windows 11, do consider purchasing, because the risk not just to you, but obviously to everybody who interacts with you, is going to go increased, is increasing as of tonight. Okay. So we begin here today with a very full day of announcements and program updates. John Albers will be joining us here shortly from Vista Gardens in Bremerton. And perhaps you remember John from a presentation that he gave just 2 weeks ago at the state conference. But the Bremerton Gardens, Vista Gardens, which he founded, offers a number of programs, a number of fall programs in particular. And so he'll be speaking about those as he joins us here a little bit later this morning. Okay, calendar-wise, lots going on. The board meets today at 1 p.m. So at 1 p.m., the board of the foundation meets today, the same URL, the same Zoom URL as you're on right now. Everyone is welcome to join. We've got a lot of things happening on Saturday: plant clinic at Ocean Shores, Greater Grays Harbor meeting at Monty, study group next Monday at the Elma Library, and the Seed Savers activity presentation coming up on Sunday. Any other October events that we need to know about? That I'm picking these up off of eNews, right? So this is where I'm getting. Is there any other announcements coming up in October here that didn't get into eNews or we need to know about?
Plant clinic in Ocean Shores was canceled on the 11th.
Okay. So, but there is not one on the 18th then? That's what I saw. Okay, so there's no plant clinic there's no plant
I'm
clinic in
sorry,
Ocean
the
Shores.
18th.
Okay, no plant clinic in eight. Okay, very good.
And then don't we have a succulent workshop on the
27th.
On the 27th, a succulent workshop. Okay. Okay, my apologies for not gathering that, but that's also in Ocean Shores. Very good.
Yes, Lori Williams is hosting that.
Oh, really good, from Mason County. Excellent. Very good. Okay, lots of things happening. And then, of course, we got to start talking now about November, because November on the 8th, on Saturday the 8th, this is one of the rare times, right? We all get together. And so we'll be at the Aberdeen Log Pavilion in Aberdeen. I need your photos. I need your photos from anything you've collected throughout the year. Email them to me, post them onto a Google Drive, and send me the link, and I can download. But as you recall, we typically put together just a photo montage, right? Just to play, as eye candy during lunch and so forth. So I need your photos to show. So please do share and send me your notes. Okay, it's Saturday the 8th on the 11 a.m. So be thinking now about what great potluck dish you wish to share. Okay. Okay, October to-dos. Lots of things happening. We've had a lot of rain actually here at the coast here just in the past couple days here. And this is absolutely the right time to be thinking about soil drainage before the rain begins. By the way, we're going to be especially interested in celebrating the new drainage at the Elma Demo Garden, right? Now that we've got that all fixed, so yeah, Rhonda and Jude, you'll have to be sending pictures of how well all the rain is being handled now, right? Yeah, crossing fingers. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, time to think about winter cover crops. This can be especially challenging, right? Again, when you have days like today, our first frost day in Western Washington, because we've got to have these things germinate. But WSU still encourages us, as difficult as it is, to work on winter cover crops. Rachel Ghana here in Pacific County says, never garden naked, right? So never go over the winter naked. It's always important to have something down there. Okay, propagation, time to divide your rhubarb. Time to think about stem cuttings to propagate your chrysanthemums, fuchsias, and geraniums. Does anybody do this, by the way? I'm curious, using stem cuttings to propagate those flowers?
Mhm.
Gail saying yes. Yeah.
I've done geraniums.
You've done geraniums that way. Is it fairly effective, fairly easy?
Oh, it's really easy. I mean, I did it in my training 10 years ago, and I still have the same plant, and I made multiple cuttings of that.
And I do my
Very cool.
coleus.
Okay.
I
found-
do my fuchsia because I have to cut it back quite a bit to get it into the greenhouse. I do my fuchsias and also my pelargoniums.
From stem cuttings, you're saying, right, Gwendolyn?
Yeah.
Very impressive, very inspiring.
I do stem cuttings by pinning my hydrangea stems to the ground. So
Okay.
I don't cut them and put them in something. I nick the branch and pin it to the ground.
And
that way.
layer it in there. Very effective. Very
Just leave
effective.
it.
And is now the time you do that then? Around this time?
Any time of year.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, wintering over. Time to just as we're doing this for the Seed Saver event, right? Time to save vegetable and flower seeds, dry, date, label, and store. Appropriate to dig and store. Any plants and bulbs you think are going to be challenged over the winter. Pot and store your tulips and daffodils if you want to force early blooms. And obviously, it's interesting about your fuchsias here. Do not cut those back until spring is the key OSU recommendation. Make sure that they do not freeze, but don't cut them back until spring. Okay. Pest monitoring. Clearly, the first mandate that we definitely want to offer to all the public with whom we engage, right, is don't treat unless you identify the problem clearly. Interesting comment here about disposing of windfall apples that might harbor apple maggots or codling moths. Raking and destroying diseased leaves, right, off of the fruit trees. Spraying the fruit trees now for overwintering. And if moles or gophers are a problem, consider traps. Now, this is interesting. That's OSU, that makes that recommendation to consider traps. As we know here in Washington State, traps are illegal for moles and for gophers. And having said that, you can still easily buy them, in most of the hardware stores. So despite the state statutes, right, they are indeed out there. And of course, the easiest thing for us to do is how can let's control the weeds, right, while they're still small, because they're only going to get bigger. And by the way, that great little publication, Managing Diseases and Insects in the Home Orchards, very useful. And just a reminder that just doing a search for WSU or OSU and whatever your topic is will yield mountains of information for you to tap into. Okay. Maintenance: do not compost diseased plants unless using hot compost. So this is again, it's tempting as it might be to throw everything in the compost pile, right? If you know your plant is diseased, hold off. Winter prep, comments about irrigation system. Interesting about, there's a strong recommendation, right, in terms of the lasagna for a newspaper cardboard to discourage weeds. Pruning out dead fruiting canes, mulch for winter protection. And of course, as Mike Carvey will share with us, now is the time, right, to clean, sharpen, and oil all your tools and equipment. And if any of us have watched Mike, dutifully take care and show some love, as he says, right, to our garden tools during his sharpening workshops, now is a great opportunity to be thinking about those. So anybody who shows up in January and March, or January, February, and March next year with rusty tools, shame on you, right? Mike has set the example here. Okay. Store supplies, fertilizer, safe, dry place, and time to think about garden soil amendments as needed per soil test. Okay. Any other to-dos, any other maintenance activities and things like that we need to be thinking about here for your gardens as you think about them putting to bed? As we think about the rains about to come?
Rains and wind.
Rains and wind. And of course, that was the
Yeah.
comment there about staking up, anything that's going to be blowing around. Okay. Program updates. A couple things to be talking about here is that this is a very important month for us because we as a foundation talk about electing our officers for the next year, for 2026. And so remember, we as a foundation gather as a 501c3, as a recognized nonprofit in the state of Washington and by the IRS, right, whose whole sole purpose, right, is to support the program. And the program is why we're all here, because we're all WSU Master Gardeners certified. And of course, as Wendy's reaching out to now recertifying, right, for 2026 here. Wendy, any comments about recertification, by the way?
I have only sent the link to people that have posted enough hours in Give Pulse to qualify for certification for 2026. So if you did not receive a link, that's because you haven't put all your hours in. And we do have a deadline, 21st.
Okay,
So
so
if you
there's
received it, yeah, you're good first.
And so if you haven't received an email from Wendy recently, right, get those hours in, right? And the deadline
Yes,
is that
and the 21st of November is, and I send out the link every time somebody updates their hours. So the majority, probably 2/3 of our people have already put all their hours in. So it's awesome.
that is excellent. Congratulations on everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so reminding ourselves, of course, and this is kind of where I'm building up in here, right, is that we are a service organization. And so why we are gathered here is that we are indeed committing ourselves to the service of our communities throughout the two counties. This, of course, does need us, as Wendy's just saying, record those hours. And of course, at this juncture, I would think that we've all gotten fairly comfortable with the new format of Give Pulse. And of course, if anybody does have problems with that, reach out to Wendy or Aaron, right? And they'll walk you through all these things. So I mentioned 2026. All of our board roles, our board officer roles are up for election. We have 1-year terms, and every role in the every officer role, is up for election. So the current board, right, is as displayed on these slides here, right? We have these, the current foundation board, and we have current regional directors. So every one of these roles is up for election. Now, job descriptions for each of these roles is available on the volunteer portal under the Give Pulse site. Now, but WPNG, pnwmg.org on that website. You'll find it under the MGV volunteer portal. Okay. And so the announced candidates for next year, the announced candidates for officers in the foundation for 2026 are as follows. Some surprise. Your entire 2025 board is willing to commit themselves to another year of service. We have an opening for president-elect if someone wants to take that role and it be mentored by Mike and the team for eventual ascendancy to the presidency. State rep, Erin is willing to take on because she just has no control over how many jobs she wants to assume. But we are allowed up to 3 state reps, up to 3 reps. So 2 in addition to Erin are welcome to come on. And I'm sure Erin would appreciate a little bit of extra help, as we go into this next year. Now, mind you, all of these candidates who are announced, we can still entertain, others who want to run for those roles. So, everyone's welcome, even, regardless of whether the position has been announced at this point or not. Now, our regional candidates for Greater Grays Harbor, Coastal Grays Harbor, and Pacific County. We have Rita Aitkins, right, is willing to step up for Pacific County. Peggy is willing to step forward again for Coastal Grays Harbor. And we have a need for a candidate for Greater Grays Harbor. So these are regional candidates, whose elections we will not be managing here at the foundation level, but they'll be selected by all the master gardeners within their regions. Okay. Any questions regarding elections? Any questions regarding it? The candidates. We'll be talking specifically about the process for elections at the board meeting here at 1 o'clock. So we'll have more information coming on all that. Okay. And then, of course, our liaison educators still officially TBD, although Dan Tutenberg, of course, acts in that capacity, in a de facto status. Jennifer Marquis is our state director, and Wendy and Aaron are our coordinators. Okay. Okay, so on to some announcements here. This is an announcement that Chris Kohler passed on, is that it's an opportunity for master gardeners to go to prison in a good way. So this is there's an organization called GRUB, GRUB, that actually has a part-time position to actually go into the Aberdeen Harbor Heights unit and teach gardening. And this may or may not, may not be interest to any of us as master gardeners, but perhaps you know of someone who is interested in such a role and would be interested in taking on these roles. It is interesting, as we've noted, that gardening and landscaping programs for incarcerated individuals actually shows incredibly good results in terms of teaching skills and improving self-esteem to take folks out of a difficult situation. So check out this job opportunities at GRUB. And then a quick note that Jude provided here: at noon today, at the close of this meeting, you can grab a quick continuing education hour if you want to jump onto an OSU extension site regarding saving trees from climate burnout. This looks to be a very interesting presentation, very interesting webinar that OSU is offering. And so it's a long, gnarly URL down there. But if you're interested in this workshop today, just do a search on saving trees from climate at OSU Extension. Okay. Other announcements for today. Announcements today. Comments and thoughts.
I have just a quick announcement. I put it in the chat, but yesterday we picked every piece of fruit on our property and it's in boxes in the back of our little truck. So if anybody's interested in apples for making sauce or Asian pears, we still have several boxes left that need to go to a good home. We're done with them.
You're done with them, that's for sure. So okay, so reach.
And
Sherry?
Oh, sorry.
No, Helen, go ahead, please.
Thank you. The Friends of the Library and Katie Lutz, the Timberland representative, are doing a program on the 28th at noon. That's a Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday, in the basement of the Motti Library. This one is called Mowing the Grass at Low Tide, or how they got rid of Spartina in the Willapa. The guy, Dave Milne, was a professor at Evergreen, and he is doing the presentation. He was very involved in this.
And Helen, that sounds very interesting, by the way. I definitely, I have many hours to my credit, right, with a backpack strapped on, spraying those guys, walking out the, at one time, by the way, we had over 12,500 acres that were infested by Spartina altiflora. And and so to actually eradicate that, because it propagates not just from seed, but also as a rhizome. And so Bev and I have actually been back to DC and lobbying in front of Congress, right, for the funds required to actually take care of Spartina.
And we don't lobby, we advocate.
We advocate. There you go. Yeah. And by the way, remember, this is we're in front of the Senate people, and they're asking, so what are you going to do? So once you return all that back to mud, what are you going to do with it then? Not realizing the mud is what we're trying to achieve, right? Anyway, this is a great story. By the way, I'm sure that's going to be a great story, Helen. So I would encourage it if folks want to join there. It's super.
Could you repeat the time again?
Noon to 1 on Tuesday, October 28th.
Thank you.
The Motti Library,
Very good.
And he will have the book, Mowing the Grass at Low Tide, Fighting the Salt Marsh Grasses That Invaded Washington's Coast.
There you go.
Includes a foreword by Danny Heck. The book is also available at Lemon Hill for those of us who are like our lunches. Maybe you can see it.
Why don't you go ahead and
Brother
post that,
Lisa.
post some of that in the chat, Helen, in terms of
Will
what the
do.
book is
Thank
and
you
so
very
forth. Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Other announcements. Wendy, Aaron, any comments regarding training, regarding the kickoff meeting you had on Saturday and at upcoming training events and how we all can participate?
Yeah, it was awesome. We had a great turnout, tiny room, but it was a great training. Aaron and Mike did a great job presenting, and we had a lot of interaction, which was really nice. Lots of mentors, so it was very good. We started off really well, and then November 15th is the next training, and that is on soils. The Grays Harbor area are going to Montesano City Hall, and Pacific County, I'm not sure what their location is, but it's the same day. So yeah, it was off to a great start. So we're super excited.
And of course, I think we're all pretty excited about this, and given the fact this is such a new training program here for this year, so we're going to be very eager in terms of you keeping us abreast of all that's going on.
Yeah, it's been very well received so far. So we're excited.
It looks like we've got a great group of volunteers who are very excited and engaged, and they want to get going.
Other announcements, other comments? Okay. With that, I do know that Mr. Albers has joined us here today. And this is John, I'm very excited to have you join with us here today. And I'm going to stop my share here and allow you to share. And quick got onto an introduction, a little bit of introduction that I'm presuming you'll by yourself here, that you'll introduce yourself here a little bit. But I was very impressed by the presentation you gave to the Master Gardener State Conference not 2 weeks ago. And so very excited to have you join us here today and share with us regarding your garden, regarding what you have achieved, because it's pretty impressive. You're right up the road there in Bremerton, and so we're eager to hear about how you created the garden, why it's there, what all we can see, and then of course I want you to pitch your new book that's coming out, which is going to be very significant. So there's lots to hear and lots to learn from you here today. So go ahead and share your screen. I'll make that. I need to make that change. Yep.
Kelly, this is Baki. I'm the executive director here at Vista Gardens. I'm still waiting for John to walk into the room.
Okay, very good.
But we logged on and I saw you announcing, so I thought I would say hi until he gets here in 5 more minutes because we
sounds good.
30. But I will, as the executive director of Vista Gardens, fill a little bit of time by explaining that what you can see here at Vista Gardens, we have a 4.25 acre botanical garden. For those of you who have never visited, it's been a public garden since 2007. We have over 1,800 types of plants, including over 450 types of conifers, over 75 types of maples. And the property is essentially a demonstration garden, demonstrating resilient and sustainable gardening techniques for the Pacific Northwest. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start the screen share, and John has entered the room. So we will begin with a short presentation that if you attended the workshop Kelly just mentioned, you may have seen or heard a little bit of this information. And then what I know John is very excited about is a Q&A. So the presentation will be about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll do a Q&A for as long as everyone can stand it. And of course, pitch the new book, the Climate Adapted Gardener, which will be coming out in April of next year, and I will be sharing a link. In fact, I'll do that right now before John sits down. I'll go ahead and share a link to the pre-sale page from the publisher of that book. That way you guys can learn more about it and maybe even pre-order. And with that, I'm going to hand the seat over to John Albers. who is the Vista Gardens founder and, of course, author of the book I just mentioned.
Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thank you. You want to change the slides?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, John, just to be clear, do you want questions, throughout the conversation, or would you rather just hold off until you finish up?
I think I'd rather hold off, but if it's a burning question that they need to know right away, I would be willing.
Sounds
But I
good.
would say,
Okay.
not, as a general practice, we'll try to minimize that at least.
Very good. And so for everyone here, if you want to post any questions you have in the chat as it goes along, or we'll definitely have time for Q&A when John tidies it up.
Okay. So I want to begin by introducing Vista Gardens. This is a garden we created and developed over the last 25 years here in Bremerton, Washington. It's now a nonprofit open to the public for their enjoyment and inspiration. And it also focuses on education, which targets development of resilient climate adapted gardens. So we're going to be talking primarily about plants and selecting plants, but it's key to remember that the foundation of resilient landscapes starts with water and soil management. So besides having an efficient irrigation system, we want to have green infrastructure included that helps minimize sending pollutants to our waterways. Two examples of those are rain gardens, which are small depressions in the soil, which are used to capture, store, and infiltrate rainfall, specifically stormwater from rainfall, which helps remove purity that it soaks through the soil. And there's also examples of vegetative swells, which are nothing but a small, shallow slope full of plants, both native and non-native, that will help slow the stormwater. And as the stormwater is slowed, it enhances water infiltration in soil and again remove pollutants. And of course, we need healthy soil to amplify our water savings, and that means having healthy soil that is water intensive and also has reasonable drainage. And in terms of regenerative soil management, just briefly, I think it's key that we get the public to determine what type of soil they really have. And that's the only way that they can then properly select their plants. And the first, of course, is determining texture, the relative amounts of sand, silt, and clay, which determines key properties of the soil. And even better yet is to have a soil test by a professional company to determine their soil quality and what deficiencies it might have. We can also, of course, improve soil health. One approach often is to add organic matter, which helps improve soil structure, enhances water infiltration, and provides nutrients for the microbial population in the soil. And there may be circumstances we may also want to add microbes such as mycorrhizae, which will help greatly in transfer of nutrients and water to woody plants and enhance drought tolerance. However, it's key to remember that we need to understand the microclimates. That means the different conditions in different parts of our garden, whether it be windy or whether there's a slope there, what types of drainage, moisture, and sun are available at that particular site throughout the different seasons as it changes. It not only changes with the seasons, but it changes over time. So it's a constant watch to determine what are your properties of your microclimates where you're putting your plants. And that will enable you then to match your microclimate to your plant's cultural requirements, which is the key point in matching right plant, right place. And to give an example of the importance of microclimate, in 2010, we had approximately 40 or more rosemary irene on a west-facing wall in Vista Gardens. In addition, we had some rosemary irene on a south-facing wall. And believe it or not, all the plants on the west-facing wall that were shaded in the morning died due to cold temperatures around 20 and below and high winds, while all the rosemary irene, exactly the same cultivar, planted at the same time, did just fine when they were facing directly south and not in any shaded conditions in the morning. So small differences in microclimate can make a big difference in life and death of a plant in a garden. So now we turn to, I think, the most important part of my presentation regarding plant selection. And of course, we have a choice of natives, near natives, and non-natives. And overall, we want to make sure that they're providing a specific function for the garden, that they enhance biodiversity and resilience. Now, native plants have evolved for thousands of years throughout the different climates, and so they're definitely adapted to our current climate regimes, whether it be wet winters and dry summers, etc. And therefore, they can handle local stresses such as heat waves and unexpected cold spells. And more importantly, they also provide for wildlife because they have co-evolved with wildlife as well for many years, and therefore they match their needs to those of wildlife. Now, therefore, it's very important for us to prioritize native species because native species restores natural habitat, supports natural processes, and contributes to long-term stability. So I think all of us can do a better job and have more resilient gardens by enhancing the amount of native species we have in our gardens today. Just one example is Caldwell's penstemon. We have maybe 100 different types of penstemons in Vista Gardens, but I picked this one as a good example because it not only is drought tolerant, native, that's adapted to the climate and soil conditions, but it also is a good ground cover because it forms a mat and helps minimize weed germination and spread, while many other penstemons do not have that property. Another one is sulfur buckwheat, Eriogonia mubulatum, a beautiful summer blooming that, as you see, is loved by the bugs and the pollinators. It's important to realize, though, that many of the drought-tolerant plants don't require rich soil as well, and do not require fertilization. I think that's an important point. Some near natives are plants that may not be directly native to our Pacific ecosystem, whether it be in Grays Harbor or here in Kitsap, but are close by, maybe from Oregon or Northern California, that have been adopted to similar Mediterranean climate and oftentimes similar soil or ecological conditions. And so this is one example of a plant that's from Oregon and California region specifically. It's a penstemon from the Southwest that's extremely drought tolerant, and yet it is adapted to our wet winters. Another was Vine Hill manzanita, Howard McMahon from California. We can grow quite a few manzanitas from California, and they do very well, very drought tolerant. But I think this is one of the best. As long as it has reasonable drainage and full sun, it does extremely well here in the Northwest. Another example is California fuchsia, is another very drought tolerant plant that should not be planted in rich soil. However, it flowers in late summer and fall at a time when many other flowering plants are not providing pollen and nectar. So it's a good example of a late blooming near native that is great for hummingbirds particularly, and also certain bee species. So now we turn to non-natives. Of course, non-natives can also provide important functions for the garden, and they're generally chosen for their ornamental diversity. They may have many unique qualities, whether it be flower uh, or, or other qualities that can provide beauty to the garden, but they also can provide ecological benefits, such as extending bloom windows, blooming late in the season. Um, However, to select non-natives, we have selected a group of very important criteria. The first one, of course, is the problem of selecting non-invasive plants. So if you know your non-natives is invasive someplace else, that's a red flag and you should ignore them. So you should certainly do your homework and to ensure that it's non-invasive. And if it suggests that it is too good to be true and spreading very rapidly, you should move it quickly from your garden. It should also provide some ecosystem services. Maybe it's going to help mitigate temperatures, as many of our non-native trees do a good job in that respect. They also can help stabilize soils and provide other benefits. Some non-native plants are also excellent as soil enhancers. And of course, we know that lupines, ceanothus, and other plants can actually fix nitrogen. And of course, the nitrogen enhances the fertility of the soil and removes the necessity of using fertilizer completely. And of course, we want to be climate adapted. So by taking plants that are from other regions that have similar Mediterranean climates, that's the first step in selection. So they're adapted to our dry summers and relatively wet winters. Secondly, they should be low maintenance, and even more importantly, I think, is low resource use. So all the plants that we select for this purpose generally do not require fertilization if you have healthy soil. And they are also drought tolerant and therefore minimizing use of irrigation or supplemental watering. And finally, they should also support wildlife by providing food, shelter, and perhaps nesting sites. So those are the criteria for selecting your non-natives. One example, we have autumn sage here, which is a Salvia firmans red. It's a very long blooming, beautiful plant that blooms throughout the summer and even early fall. So it's still blooming. It's a good example of a non-native that blends well with our native plants. The other one is Catmint Walker Slow, and it's also a long bloomer. And if it's pruned, if it stops blooming, it will actually again rebloom again throughout the summer. And then we'll pick geranium. Geranium is one that not particularly for full sun, but it does better in partial shade, particularly shade in the hot afternoon sun. But if this is done, it's reasonably drought tolerant. It provides beautiful flowers, and more importantly, it's an excellent ground cover to minimize weed germination and spread. So we're going to select some beneficial non-natives. One is golden oregano. Many herbs, of course, do very well here in our drought tolerant, and this is a good example of oregano growing on a south-facing, very dry, summer dry hillside, and yet it does very well. in addition to add some beauty to that hillside. It also provides some flowers for the pollinators. So with our plant choices, we have to think about their ecological benefits. So in doing so, we first prioritize natives. We want to add near and non-natives that provide us with specific services. And of course, we want to make sure they provide some benefits for wildlife. So we have to consider why pollinators are important and how do we support our pollinators in the garden. First of all, we know pollinators are very important because 75% or 3/4 of our flowering plants depend upon pollinators for fertilization. Also, 35% of our global food production depends upon pollinators. So definitely we need to support pollinators that have been declined significantly in the last 20 years. But there's two types of pollinators, the generalists and the specialists. There's about 35% of our Western bees are pollen specialists. This means that they depend upon one or just a few very closely related plants. And if they're not present, they're not going to be available in the garden. And to provide for them, of course, the native plants are your best pick because generally the specialists have adapted to the native plants in our region. Also, 80% of the plant-eating insects rely on host plants. Therefore, it's clear that native plants best support these specialist pollinators, while the non-natives do fine in supporting the generalist pollinators. So we want to provide for pollinators and wildlife in developing our gardens and green spaces to provide diverse overlapping bloom times, to provide pollen and nectar throughout all seasons, and also planting them in cluster drifts, making them more readily accessible to the pollinators. And of course, a water source is very useful for pollinators and wildlife. And it's also important to sometimes retain our seed heads of flowers and also not remove all the stems of the flowers because over the winter, but not wait until the following spring because these stems, particularly if they're hollow or pithy stems, they provide nesting and overwintering for a number of insects, including our native mason bees, for example. So besides selecting flowers for their beauty, we want to ensure that they also provide pollen, nectar, and shelter for our insects. So we want to know whether consideration is whether the species are cultivars. The species, of course, have genetic diversity and have wildlife links to pollinators and other water life. While cultivars may be selected for particular traits, maybe they have more flowers, maybe the flowers are larger, maybe they have different colors, etc., or maybe they're double flowers. Unfortunately, many of these changes make them less useful for our pollinators, and that's very important. So there are ecological trade-offs. So if you select a cultivar, you have to check into the possibility that it may not serve its role or provide ecological benefits. So species provide ecological health and resilience, while the cultivars may add ornamental variety and may have more similar size and flowering qualities, but they risk ecological trade-offs. So we always should consider that in our plant selection. So now we want to talk very quickly a little bit about planting. Once we chose the right plant, it's really important to plant it properly. And I'm sure most of you know that it's very important to plant it at the proper level You want to expose the root flare, the point at which the trunk meets the roots, slightly above ground level. And you want to spread the roots and make sure they're exposed to the local or native soil. And when needed, of course, you can add mycorrhizae, particularly if it's a woody plant, which would help the plant get established and enhance its drought tolerance. So just also it's important to water it deeply, but infrequently. And to retain moisture, you can use mulch around plants. And we essentially do all our planting here in Vista Gardens in the fall because that's the time where you have root growth. You take advantage of the cooler temperatures and the rainfall, minimize the necessity of watering these plants. And then they're in better shape and better prepared to handle and deal with the dry summers. So we have to consider the impact of climate change on our gardens. Increased temperatures, increased carbon dioxide concentrations can both contribute to the spread of invasives. So we always have to look out for invasives. Or a plant that's not invasive today could be our invasive plant of tomorrow. So we always have to keep our eyes open for that. We also have phenology shifts. What this means is that we can have a mismatch between the needs of the pollinators and other insects and the timing of the flowering. Because as temperatures warm, we know that our flowers are blooming earlier, for example. And of course, they're also subject to heat and drought stress. Back a number of years ago, in 2021, we had 108 degrees here in Vista Gardens. And of course, that was a very dramatic high temperature for 3 days, which caused significant damage and browning to our needles of the multiple conifers we had here in this garden. So we have to manage it proactively and always be prepared for coming heat waves or unexpected cold spells. So I want to mention briefly on conifers. I believe conifers are generally a good choice for a warming climate because they're drought tolerant, adaptable, long-lived. They provide year-round ecological services. And a good example is that unlike broadleaf trees, they retain their leaves, which have the ability to not only remove pollutants year-round, but also slow the heavy rains that we have in the wintertime. And they also provide four-season interest. So just one example is in the center island there, you see Abies concolor la vida, a beautiful soft blue color, slow growth of maybe 4 inches per year or less, very attractive throughout the year. Another one is one of my favorites is Cedar of Lebanon Green Prince, which grows about 4 inches per year. This particular one is nearly 40 years old, which we brought over from across the water. Has beautiful tiered branching. It's never been fertilized or watered during those 40 years. It's sort of a natural bonsai-looking plant, really adding beauty throughout the seasons. Another is one of my choice Deodar cedar, which all do very well here in the Northwest. And this is a dwarf called Silver Mist, maybe growing 4 inches per year. It has very attractive, light, new foliage with minimum amount of chlorophyll, and therefore they come out white looking. Very attractive small tree. Another is the Italian cypress, of course, extremely drought tolerant. Once established, this is Swan's golden, makes an excellent tall hedge or privacy screen. And this is actually 3 of them together in a row. However, broadleaf trees, of course, complement conifers, and they can add ornamental services and not only, of course, help remove pollutants in the summertime, They add seasonal interest and beauty and benefits for animals as well. Uh, One unusual one which I like is the Judas tree. It comes from the Mediterranean region, Cercis siliquastum, and it's unusual. It has flowers uh, being developed directly on the bare stem and beautiful heart-shaped leaves as well, and extremely drought tolerant and pest and disease resistant. Another one, of course, is smoke tree. The one I picked is Golden Spirit. Unlike most smoke trees that have purple foliage, this one has a light green or with yellowish tint. Has beautiful, smoky, like typical flowers, and does very well in the Northwest. And it has the added benefit in fall that the leaves turn reddish. Crab apples do very well here in the Northwest. This is just one example of probably 8 different varieties that do well here. Has very attractive flowers. In addition, it has purple leaves. So we want to diversify our plantings, particularly tree plantings, in order to get climate resilience that support the ecological benefits and are visually dynamic. So we want to mention briefly, shrubs are a very important part of a resilient garden. They, of course, can provide shade and cooling and offer habitat and food for wildlife and improve air and water quality. And just some examples, Erica bacons is probably one of the most drought-tolerant heaths available, which has a very distinctive flower, and it's very attractive to pollinators. And it blooms in the late season, late summer and fall, when many other flowering plants are not available for the pollinators. Blue mist shrub, also a very drought-tolerant plant, Coreopsis longwood blue, is an excellent choice and quite attractive to pollinators as well. Another one, native to Mexico, Mexican orange, does very well here in the Northwest. This is Choicea tornata. Has beautiful, sweet-smelling flowers and attractive foliage, either green or yellow, depending upon the cultivar species selected. And then, of course, perennials are a key part of our gardens, and you can select many perennials that are quite adaptable to our dry summers and wetter winters. And with the flowers are very important to support pollinators, insects, and the birds. They, of course, stabilize the soil, enhance water infiltration, and provide us with a mixture of colors, textures, and vital habitat. Just a couple of examples that I like. One is curlicue sage, which is an artemisia with beautiful texture. And it does much better than the typical artemisias that are sold here in the nurseries. So I certainly think this is a good choice for giving the garden excellent texture, unusual texture, at the same time being drought tolerant and can withstand fairly well our wet winters as well, provided you have reasonable drainage. This is gray creeping germander, which comes from the Mediterranean region, has beautiful flowers and quite attractive ground cover, which minimizes weed growth where it is present. And behind that is another attractive flower that blooms in the summertime that is very drought tolerant. And we also have the Turkey speedwell is a very low growing, maybe 2 or 3 inches high, but it has beautiful flowers and excellent ground cover for conditions of drought and full sun. So we can assemble a resilient plant balance by selecting for drought tolerance, wildlife support, and it should include both perennials and shrubs, and of course trees will be included in our panel. We want to select long blooming plants, ideally, and properly site them for their water needs, soil, and sun requirements. So the important thing is, of course, is we talk very briefly about water conservation, the importance of having healthy soil and proper plant choices. This is what's needed to create resilient, biodiverse, low-input gardens. So by doing this, we have the power to conserve, restore, enhance, and sustainably manage our local urban ecosystems. However, we need to embrace this new aesthetic I brought up that values natural and wild elements and prioritizes native plants. So we have to allow areas to grow more freely and express their ecological richness. It's important for master gardeners to impress upon the public that their gardens are dynamic living systems, and they can only become resilient by following the principles outlined this morning. This transformation begins by having mindful choices. We have to understand the environmental impact of our gardening selections by prioritizing not only native plants, but locally adapted plants, and making sure that we avoid invasive species that disrupt ecological balance. Every decision we make, no matter how small, helps shape the health of our shared environment. So it's important that everyone create urban green spaces that facilitate and sustain biodiversity, foster resilience, and reconnect us with the living world around us. So some examples, of course, that people can do is maybe plant one portion of the garden into a native bed. They may improve the soil in one area, or maybe they want to add a water-wise hydrozone. These are good examples of what each of us, and we can encourage the public to do this. So our gardens are part of the solution of a changing climate. We can help create these resilient landscapes that our future depends upon. So I think we're in there and really give you a chance to answer any questions you have.
John, phenomenal stuff here. I tell you, this is, I again, I attended the presentation as you gave it to the state conference, but it's riveting to have you follow up on this and and to expand in more detail. I've got a whole bunch of questions, but I want to make sure we're opening up for everybody here.
Okay.
I noticed that just one of the things I wanted to talk about is that that you're a champion of near natives. And it just, and I appreciate the fact that near natives relative to the cultivars can be particularly appropriate for our climate here.
Right.
To your extent, they still, of course, slightly miss the mark, don't they, in terms of species dependent pollinators and species dependent foragers from an insect standpoint?
Yes and no. It depends upon the selection. But I think we pick near natives because they are non-natives too, and we need to. I make the important point, which I may have not made, is that all the criteria we have for non-natives apply to near natives because they're not natives. Number one. And number two, they're more likely to provide ecological benefits, more likely to be adapted than a native that's not near. So that's why we focus on those, and we're doing that actively here in Vista Gardens. Uh, and I think in generally, the ones we've selected, particularly the ones in Oregon, they may be our next natives anyway. The native population is changing over time as we have climate change. So we'll have plants that are particularly slightly south of our region will eventually migrate further north or be established here and become more native here in the Northwest. So I think those are good choices. But at the same time, will they be great for the specialists? Perhaps not, but they are more likely to have the ability to match the specialist needs than non-natives from farther regions. Let me put it that way. But I think
Well,
you're correct.
no, well stated, and I appreciate the nuance, by the way. And by the way, I
Right.
really do appreciate the fact that, as climate change comes on, some of the near natives down in Oregon probably are going to become more
Yes,
to, more native to our, to our climates here.
right.
Hey, so
So
what,
a question from the chat is someone is asking about catmint and oregano being incredibly invasive in their garden. And are there particular cultivars that are not invasive? Someone else responded, it's not invasive, it's just growing uh, with great strength, and bees love it. Do you have comments, John, on the invasiveness or aggressiveness?
Well, it depends upon what, if it's choking out out of other plants, then we remove it. So I think and that's true with near natives from California. Number one, I would recommend if you have a near native that's drought tolerant, it's not appropriate to plant those in rich garden soils that many people have today in their small plots. They are for less fertile soils and well draining soils. So in those cases, they may have more invasive tendencies, number one. So it's also important to site both natives and non-natives in the appropriate spot. And if your spot, they are being very overly aggressive, then they should be removed. So it is indeed possible that the plants that I feel are doing well here and are not overly aggressive, they could be over aggressive under other circumstances and in someone else's garden here in the Northwest. And of course, there's variation in climate. Grays Harbor is not Kitsap County, for example. So we have to consider those variations as well. So I think we have to keep an open mind. If the plant establish invasive tendencies in your garden, it should be removed.
Baki, do you want to go on and continue with questions in the chat?
Yes, I'd love to. So next question is, do we here at Vista Gardens, do we have seed saver events? Do we allow clippings from some plants? And if so, when would we do that?
Do we allow
folks to come here and gather seeds for their garden or clippings for their propagation goals?
Yes, we can do that as long as it's prearranged. That should not be a problem.
So you can reach out to us at info@vistagardens.org at any time, and we're happy to accommodate your requests.
And I wonder if this is an opportunity for Baki and John for you to talk about all the upcoming events that you have. I mean, you have a tremendous amount on your webpage here in terms of the activities, programs, and tours that you're
Right.
offering.
I would really invite everyone to check each month the vistagardens.org.org website and go to the visit and learn page to see our calendar. It's usually fairly complete for at least 2 months out. And then also sign up for our newsletter, which you can do on the homepage of the website. The newsletter comes out of the first of every month, and that will keep you in the loop on everything. This month we have a wonderful autumn leaves tour coming up on this next Saturday, the Saturday right in front of us. And you can sign up online for that. We try to have 1 to 3 tours a month, which John leads also with other docents sometimes. And these are educational tours on different subjects such as drought tolerant plants, or shade plants, or conifers, or discovering plants that are great for autumn colors, this sort of thing. So it takes the educational tours combine aesthetic values and design values with ecological function and practical information. And then we also have workshops, hands-on workshops like propagation workshops from cuttings and from seeds, which we don't have on the calendar right now. We're still scheduling with Philip Bloomquist, who comes to do those here. And then we have workshops that are also in person or on Zoom, such as shade gardening or planting grasses and this sort of thing, done with visiting horticulturists and landscape designers. For example, Susan Calhoun teaches a few workshops each year with us. And then we do garden adjacent activities. Like we have a art circle where people come and gather and do watercolors together. We have a phone photography workshop in the fall and winter months, once a month here and that sort of thing. And if you ever have an idea or a request for a type of program, just let us know. And we're always excited to bring you new activities here. So next question is, do you see insects from south of us moving more into our area? Would planting near natives from Oregon or California be wise? That's for you, John.
Well, we do see new insects coming, but where they're coming from, I wouldn't know. So that's a difficult question. I guess the implication here is that we're attracting insects that we don't want to have here by having near natives.
And so the next,
So, well, let me answer
Oh.
that. I think I see. I'm following this. What happened to that?
it's here.
Oh,
So the next one is, will any of the recommended natives or near natives crowd out English ivy enough to stop its growth?
no. The simple answer is no. We had a large stand of English ivy here when I came to Vista Gardens on a bank. We also had about a acre of lawn that was removed. In fact, that was the great potential when I saw the lawn. We could remove the lawn and plant something else. But the English ivy required getting three strong men from across the water, and the four of us dug out the English ivy with shovels and picks uh, and removed it. So you can't smother out English ivy with other plants. The answer is no. The best thing is to dig it out and remove it once and for all.
But the good news is, as many of you have probably learned, recently it was just listed as invasive and will not be sold in anywhere in Washington State.
It's a big
Garden.
win for sure. Hmm.
Right.
Hey, so John, you talked about the, obviously as the winter comes on, don't deadhead and don't over clean the garden, right? Because we
Yes.
want those
Yes.
overwintering brush for
Right.
insects.
Right.
Are there techniques, however, that you have developed to make sure that the garden doesn't become just unsightly? Because I'm presuming that what cleanup still preserves the aesthetic of the garden without destroying the habitat opportunities?
Selective cleanup.
Selective cleanup.
So,
Okay.
yes. So I guess in simple terms, we do remove some of the plants and some of the uh, for cleanup, when we leave parts of the garden available. So we don't clean up everything completely. We selectively clean up. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how do you know which part to clean up? But you have to, number one, know your plants. If you know which plants have hollow or pithy stems, you want to make sure you leave those. The other ones you can cut down because they're not going to provide nesting sites in the wintertime.
So
That's
a good clue right there. So looking for stalks that are going to withstand the winter.
Right, right, right. So like Joe Pye weed is a good one. There's a long list, and you want to provide. You can just Google, say which ones are hollow or pithy stems, and make sure you leave those, and then you cut the other ones. And the other thing, I think you brought up the aesthetic. I think that dead plants is not a bad aesthetic. It's what we're accustomed to is the problem. We're accustomed to an unnatural aesthetic, a manicured aesthetic, and we have to remove that and realize that nature is beautiful, whether it's alive or dying, because that's a natural process. And my aesthetic includes those things. But so I think two things, you have to change your view of what a good aesthetic is, and number two, selectively remove some things to improve your old aesthetic. You got it?
That's a very, very wise and sage perspective. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions, comments for John? I want to make sure that that everybody gets an opportunity. This is a unique opportunity we have here.
Well, any of the recommended natives or near natives?
You addressed
Oh,
that.
we answered that one? Yeah. What else?
I have a question. So when we were talking about cutting down, removing the things that are spent in our garden, leaving them there for the bugs to nest.
Right.
What if, this is just an idea I had, what if we were able to cut them down so that our garden would look clean, but yet still stack them somewhere or put them out where they're available for the bugs? Would they still use them after they were cut off the plant? Some of those.
And leave them on the ground, you mean?
Yeah, like make a pile of them, or would they still use them?
I would believe that's a real possibility.
I do exactly that with foxglove.
Yes.
I have a lot of foxglove and it has hollow stems, and I cut them all to clean up the garden bit, and I leave them in
Well, most people who cut remove them, but it's true that if you leave them somewhere, they should be available then to be used by the mason bees and the other animals that wire that for nesting. Yeah, so that's a real consideration as an option to try.
Yeah, because I live right by the woods, so I can put stack stuff in the woods. Well, I do stack stuff in the woods
Sure.
where I can't see it, but I'm hoping that the bugs and things will still be
Well, if you
able
do it, you can examine that in the winter and then see if some of the insects are actually using those. Follow up to see if that really was beneficial.
And if you think about how a bee box works, a bee box is really just imitating a hollow stem, a stack of hollow stems that are sort of bundled together.
Right.
So
should
clearly, if it's accessible, it becomes an opportunity.
Right.
Cool. Thanks.
Good suggestion.
So John and Baki, visitors to the garden, are there things that what most impresses them when visiting your garden? What takeaways are just kind of this, the ahas that your garden inspires? And by the way, we're coming from the perspective of master gardeners here.
I would say number one, it has a great diversity of plants, and everybody says, "Oh, you've done a wonderful job of designing a beautiful garden." Well, nature is the designer, not me. I just included a diversity of plants which have a large mix of textures and colors and heights and forms. And that what establishes the beautiful garden in my mind. And I think it's also important to realize to have a resilient garden, if at all possible, is to have a layered garden. So we went to great lengths to have trees, shrubs, and perennials in many different areas. So they're meant to, as you have more layers, you establish more kinds of habitats that's required for the wildlife. And that's also important. So I think a combination of having a layered, diverse plant palette has gone a long way of impressing people. And of course, we have a very diverse conifer collection, about 450 different conifers here, which add year-round texture and form and color to the garden, maybe an added benefit.
And many visitors are often quite impressed with not just the diversity, but the diversity of beauty in every season. You can come to Vista Gardens any day of the year and you will find really exciting layers and combinations of plants and blooms and insects and animals. It has become sort of a nature preserve in a residential area. And when you enter it, you're really it's called Vista Gardens because it's on a slope. And so you have vista views of the Washington Narrows and the Olympics and Mount Rainier. And so you suddenly go from being in basically a neighborhood into being in this magical world of plants and animals, and you can actually get lost in it. Someone has gotten lost in our quarter acre garden before, because of the density of layers and plantings. And so it often proves to people that a garden can be beautiful in any conditions, any time of the year. And it opens up people's minds to the types of plants that you can have here. Right now, we have olive trees with fruit on them. We have persimmons and pomegranates with fruit on them. We have peaches and plums earlier in the year, along with all the other berries. And so the aspects of the Mediterranean climate that John is leaning into in the Pacific Northwest are really paying off in bringing a diversity of joy and beauty and fruit and flowers, etc.
And I think the other thing, the term Vista Gardens comes because the topography is such that what you see varies dramatically as you walk through the garden. And we have beautiful views of the mountains and waters as well, besides the garden itself. So we have beautiful borrowed scenery as well, which I think enhances the people's thoughts about the garden.
Now, are there? Go ahead,
Everyone's
please.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. We also have landscape art included in the garden as well.
So with respect, there's got to be areas of the garden that are truly mature and so mature that you need to renovate or replace. So I'm curious about, recommendations or thoughts regarding an overly mature garden, shall we say, in which a plant or an area truly is overwhelming the other choices that are around it.
We're removing trees.
Okay.
Now. So we do need to we are removing trees now and doing some thinning. So generally when we plant and design, we planted for maybe a 10 to 20 year spread where it's been over 20 years for most of the areas. I think 2 acres we didn't start until 2001, yet it's very mature. And the growth on this hillside generally is double what the nurseries say a given plant will grow. And number one, they are not given any fertilizer. We do not fertilize any plant unless it's in a pot. And large part of the garden is not irrigated in the summer. Yet, in spite of that, we have double the average growth of what the nurseries recommend a given plant will grow. So I think part of that has to do with, I guess they're happy here. They're happy with the soil and lots of sun on the southwest facing hillside. But it does require that we will now have to remove particularly some of the larger specimens. And the other problem, of course, a garden is always changing. So areas which we had plants for full sun are now being shaded. And so they're not appropriate any longer. And so we have to make choices and change the plant palette in places because of the changing sun availability.
So what new plants are we going to be adding?
Well, we'll be adding more shade plants where we had sun before. And so there's 2 things going on, doing that, but also removing some of the larger trees that are growing too close together is also going to be necessary and being done as we speak.
And recently we just started some new plantings because we did some changes to the property. Do you want to talk about those plants?
Well, it has to do with Madrona Woods. We have a woodland of about a half an acre that was here when I came. And of course, madronas are dying, so we're trying to reestablish and add a more variety of native plants in this area. And we're also planting hybrid madronas from California. They have many similar properties, but they're generally smaller than a native madrone, and they're not as messy. But at the same time, I think they provide ecological benefits. So we're comparing those and also hopefully transplanting some madronas that are less susceptible or still healthy and will maintain healthy in our Pacific ecosystem. But we're also adding other native plants, even though it's primarily pristine native, except for the bird cherry. We think that by adding more diverse native plants, overall it will be more resilient over time.
You want to mention a few of the plants that we actually are putting in?
Well, thimbleberry as a ground cover. We add, we're actually adding cultivars of Douglas fir, which is a dwarf blue cultivar of a Douglas fir. We wanted to be native, but we didn't want a huge Douglas fir there, so we are using a Blue Angel that was discovered by the wife of Sam Pratt of Conifer Kingdom. And then we're also planting currant, golden currant is another example. We've had, the Ribes sanguineum, but we thought the golden currant is another good one that was not growing precipitously in our garden, but is native. Those are examples that we're doing. So we're adding some new natives to
some dogwoods.
Dogwood, native dogwood. We have native dogwood growing there naturally, and they're not having any problem with anthracnose, even though it's acceptable. Here in this particular garden, it seems to be doing fine, so we're planting additional dogwood as another example. So it's an ongoing process. We're constantly adding new plants and taking out some of the older, larger plants at the same time. So it's a constant process to adjust when you have a multi-layered landscape. But we have 15 different garden regions, and so we have one where we have a giant sequoia, which we bought the property to save that sequoia. It's a 100-year-old tree, and there's no laws protecting that. We have to do better to provide laws to protect large trees, but at the same time, in this particular garden, we are primarily planting ground covers and smaller plants so we don't block the view of the neighbors. And it's an area with full sun and not irrigated. And it also was exposed to deer because we did not fence it. So it's a good example of a deer-resistant, drought-tolerant garden. So each garden has a different plant palette and provides a different function. And it's the combination of all these different gardens that I think is that attract the people.
So there's a question in the chat about the California redwood. Are we planning to add any more redwoods to?
No, but nature has added several redwoods up on top of the hill, and we left them growing. We did not plant those. They were volunteers. So we actually have volunteer California redwoods here in the property. But we're not planning, well, we have limited space, so we have to be selective in planting new large trees.
But yet more evidence that plants and animals are moving north.
Very much so. What is your general climate like up there at the garden in terms of annual rainfall and temperature range?
Well, like I say, we don't have, we had in January, it's not just temperature range, it's timing. Let me explain. In January 2024, we had cold temperatures of, maybe mid-20s below freezing, and we had a lot of damage, more damage in that cold spell than we had in the heat wave of 108 degrees, if you exclude the conifers. So we had a very mild fall and mild winter, and then we had this big cold spell in January that caused a lot of damage in 2024. And in the summertime, so we do, and before we used to have temperatures below 20, we don't see those anymore. So that's changing. So definitely the average temperature is definitely going up in the wintertime. Our nights are, of course, warmer. That's another distinguishing factor. And our rainfall may be, I think, more typical of Seattle, greater Seattle region, probably around 40 inches. But we generally have definitely less rain. I mean, this summer again has been very dry. Our September has been gorgeous, but very dry. And now we're already in October and it's still dry. So the dry summer and the dry period is extended. There's no question of that here. And I think you on the coast, maybe you're going to be more mild temperatures than we are here. So we have more temperature extremes, but they're on the warmer side. So our cold temperatures are definitely less than they were 10 years ago. And we're growing things here now that we couldn't grow here in 2010, for example. So that's the difference. It's a changing mountain. I think the total rainfall hasn't changed that much, but the rainfall in the summer is less on average.
Other questions, comments for John? This is very, very important stuff, and this has been great, John. I want to make sure that we all get our questions answered, and in particular, that we're all making calendar plans to come visit.
Yes. You can't appreciate it without being here. That's your best bet.
And it's clear, right, that as you and Baki pointed out, there's stuff to see here in the fall and in the winter, right? There's lots still going on. And mind you, from a master gardener perspective, this is very important for all of us, right? Because we're always eager to provide that consultation to the public in terms of how do they create a garden and a landscape that's going to be interesting year round, not just in the summertime.
We're not just interesting, but also good for the wildlife and the pollinators. I think that you have to add that point. And people forget that. I mean, our birds are declining because our insects are declining and the pollinators are declining, and those are critical for our overall long-term survival. And if we don't do something now, it's just going to be a more difficult problem. But it puts urban gardens and green spaces as very important for our future because that's where we can do something about this. We can actually provide and enhance the benefits for the pollinators and wildlife by changing this garden aesthetic that I'm proposing. And the general public has to see it that way in order to take the step to do things differently. I think that's important.
By the way, I also want to point out to the FAQs that you have on the website here, because there's just a lot of good general questions that amplify a lot of the points you've made here, John, relative to plant choice, relative to a microclimate, etc.
Right.
Yeah, and actually to address one of the questions in the chat, is there a cost to visit? So we are open 52 weeks a year. We have open garden days 3 days a week. They shift around a little bit, but right now for fall, it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We do ask for a $10 per adult visitor donation, but it is a donation, so it's up to you. You can give us $1, $100, or whatever works for you. We're happy for the support. And for our educational tours, we request a $15 per person donation, similar for workshops. And of course, we actually have a membership, which is only $30 a year for individuals, $40 a year for couples. That gets you 10% off 4 nurseries year round, including the Native Plant Nursery Woodbrook in Gig Harbor, Valley Nursery in Poulsbo, Bay Hay and Feed on Bainbridge, and Conifer Kingdom in Salem, Oregon. They ship rare and unusual and beautiful conifers and maples.
Yeah.
As well as you get free educational tours if you're a member, so those become free, and you can visit, of course, for free and bring your friends and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of benefits. You're both supporting your new favorite nonprofit while also supporting your plant habit with those discounts at the nurseries.
One other point I wanted to add, I think one of the master gardeners, of course, have clinics and people bring plants in. The biggest problem is that majority of problems relate to planting the wrong plant in the wrong microclimate. So people don't know the cultural requirements of the plant. And this is something that I've tried to include with hundreds of plants in my new book. It provides the cultural requirements. And then you, at the same time, have to know what are your conditions in your particular garden where you plan to plant it. And with that, matching, doing a better job matching, we'll see less plants coming into the clinic for those reasons.
In a great closing point here in terms of just recapitulating that the new book coming out, right? And so the pre-sale link that's in the chat, everyone, be thinking about this. This is our time to be grabbing this book and to be planning a visit. Any other Go ahead, please.
I just added the link again, so people have it. Yeah, fresh. Because of course we're excited to show the publisher all the interest in the subject and particularly in John's book.
I think our goal, of course, is to preserve this garden in perpetuity. But and of course, the property now is part of the foundation. But to do that, of course, we need the public support and all. And as we have more support, we'll do our best to provide more educational programs and that are in line completely with the Master Gardener's goals. Our goal is what the Master Gardeners want to do for the public. And I think we can do a better job, and so can the Master Gardeners, by educating the public somehow and getting them to see what they need to do to have resilient gardens for our future.
John, Baki, thank you so very much for today. An incredibly rich presentation, right? And robust thoughts and perspectives that I do wholeheartedly agree, John, is that what you're doing there with the gardens is very much aligned with what the WSU Master Gardener program is all about.
Right. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Baki.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, everybody, make sure you're clicking on that, on the pre-sale link to get this book lined up, right? This is right the right time to be doing it. And in fact, I do have that as the, I do know that I had that as the, as another slide in here too. So just to make sure we were cleaning up on that, yeah. So any other questions, comments for everybody before we, as we close the meeting here? Reminder that we have our board meeting coming up.
Well, we look forward to a group of Grays Harbor Master Gardeners coming to visit. We'd like to host you anytime. I guess we lost them.
No, we're right here, John. We hear you, and that's for sure. And we're giving a thumbs up on that.
Okay, great.
Kelly, I think this is Midge. I think this would be a good field trip for study group
it'd be an excellent one for study group. Yeah.
So.
And Wendy and Aaron, I hope you heard. I mean, it's everything that John's talked about lines up exactly with what our training programs are all about, especially. In fact, John, I love the nuance on the right plant, right climate preserved place.
Yeah. Right.
Any other thoughts and comments from anyone?
All right.
Okay.
We will see you here at Vista Gardens.
That is the plan. Thanks, Baki. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you.
And thank everyone here this morning. Reminder, our board meeting is at 1 o'clock here today, right? Same Zoom URL. Everyone is welcome. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.